Our first roundtable will be about the green transition of the capitals in EU enlargement countries, but in some EU member countries as well. And the moderator will be Burtejin Zorigt, who I would like to ask to take the stage. And the speakers are going to be Biljana Đorđević, member of National Assembly of Serbia, Borislav Sandov, former Deputy Prime Minister for Climate Policies, Minister of Environment and Water in Bulgaria, Tomislav Tomašević, Mayor of Zagreb, Kata Tüttő, Deputy Mayor of Budapest, and Erion Veliaj, the Mayor of Tirana. And I would just like to take the opportunity to also tell that originally there was a planned presentation of Alexander Faludi here at the conference. Finally, because of he just recently, they have a newborn in the family, so he can't make his speech, which on the other hand, which is a sad news, the good news is that we will have 45 minutes total for this roundtable, and the bit of delay we have can be overcome. So, Berta, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. As a proud CU alumni, I'm also very happy to welcome you here at this panel. And I think it's a very nice, diverse panel, including both politicians from the local and national levels, also from different cities and countries in the region. So I'm sure that we can learn a lot from each other and also see how we can collaborate more regarding the green transition. So my first question would be to Tomislav. I'm sorry to interrupt you. So,
no, it's fine.
So, yeah, Tomislav, I saw that you supported Budapest Mayor Gergely Karácsony in the spring in his fight to the planned so-called mini Dubai development in Budapest, and the plans involve building several skyscrapers and luxury apartments in a district of Budapest. And Tomislav, in your statement of support, you mentioned that a similar development happened already in Belgrade, but you managed to stop a similar development in Zagreb. So I was wondering if you could share how you managed to stop this development, given that these developers are quite active in the region, and you might be able to give some advice to the other panelists.
Okay, first of all, good morning to everybody. I'm so privileged and happy to be again on the Budapest Forum. I think this is my third time, if I'm not mistaken, as the mayor to speak here. So I already feel like at home, almost as a domestic speaker. Also, I mean, greetings to my colleagues, which we all know each other and we cooperate well. I mean, this is also good that when you know everybody on the panel, that means that actually we are actually networking and we are cooperating together. Yes, this was the support to the mayor of Budapest and to the people of Budapest. It's very similar to Mini Dubai project in Budapest, what was planned to happen in city of Zagreb. The difference is only the name, I would say, which was called Zagreb Manhattan project. That was the so-called name, like the so-called name here is called Mini Dubai. And basically, we have the same or almost the same investors. We have the similar project. The only difference was that it was in the waterfront of the river of Sava in the city of Zagreb. It's also luxurious apartments, skyscrapers. I mean, it's very similar to, unfortunately, what happened in Belgrade, where they also had a fierce fight and opposition and struggle against this type of urban development. And pretty much what was also the problem in the city of Zagreb was this idea of basically creating these spaces which would be pretty much closed to other citizens of Zagreb. If not physically closed, they would definitely be closed economically for the other citizens of Zagreb. So this type of, instead of that our cities focus on more affordable housing, we get these urban developments which are pretty much gentrification and of course, they are changing the skyline with this huge skyscraper, I think more than 200 meters in Budapest. But I would say this is even, I would say, a secondary point to the idea of, you know, who are we creating our cities for? I mean, are these for the citizens of our cities, or are these for you know, people who are maybe going to buy apartments in these kind of buildings, but they would visit the city once per year or even less? So we had the only difference, which I would say comparing to Belgrade and Budapest, what happened in Zagreb was that this was not the project which was pushed by the national government. It was pushed by the previous local government, and of course that made it easier for us to fight it. I was at that time city councillor, so this was happening around 5 years ago. There was a huge opposition by the Architects Association. There was a huge opposition from the civil society groups, and there was also a fierce opposition from the opposition in the city council. By mobilizing really thousands of citizens, thousands of comments in the public debate, by showing that also pretty much all the physical spatial plans would have to be adapted for this specific project, and that this is so instead of the city creating a vision and creating a spatial plan, saying what can be built, and then offering this to all the investors, so they compete. Instead of that, you have a situation where you make a deal with one investor, they say what they want to build, and then you adapt your spatial plan towards these needs. So it's the other way of how the transparent procedure. So even if you want to build this kind of content, this should be then, you know, these rules or this opportunity should be given to all the investors, and then you bid. So this kind of process, I think, made the citizens of Zagreb very angry. I mean, that these deals were made in Dubai by the previous mayor of Zagreb and the investor, and then everything was just supposed to be followed up by the city council after this. And this mobilized, as I said, a big support from the citizens, and then the Ministry of Construction pretty much, the changes of the spatial plan, they found some legal mistakes, and then politically this was difficult for the coalition partners of the mayor to support that kind of plan. So they postponed it, but pretty much the first minute that when they postponed it, it was dead. Politically, it was dead spatial plan, and so we managed to stop this. And a few years after that, we have now a new government in the city. I'm the mayor already for 3 years, and we are doing things much different. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing that. As we already mentioned Belgrade, I will turn to you, Biljana. And so, as we already mentioned, similar developments were taken place in Belgrade, including also the Chinese high-speed trains. And I was wondering, you know, like these developments, also including the controversial developments like the Jadar lithium mine, how do these projects align with the countries and the cities' green transition plans?
Thank you. Well, I also want to thank the invitations, the organizers of this forum. It's a pleasure to be here, and I also hope that, unfortunately, this year we failed to have a green mayor in Belgrade, but hopefully one day we will join Zagreb and Budapest and many other cities. And unfortunately, we didn't prevent Belgrade Waterfront project, which we opposed on various reasons, including environmental ones. It's also on the riverbanks that were public and that are now, it's basically huge gated community that eats up Belgrade, and entire development of the city is based on this project that excludes ordinary citizens. But this was, at that time when we opposed this, we saw this as something that will be a characteristic of entire government, entire development of the country. In the meantime, we created a Green Left Front as a party and became politicians. And the projects that you mentioned are similar in that regard. I first have to say, of course, we, as Serbia, has adopted various or signed various international climate treaties, and it has to align as a EU country, candidate country with legislation. So we do have climate goals in terms of fighting climate change and energy transition. It's in the document. Of course, it's not perfect, but it's there. But this is not a publicly communicated goal. It's not a political goal of the government. You never hear President Vučić talking about that. And oftentimes what he talks about, it's against these type of goals. And when it's in the document, it's never just energy transition. It's just energy transition. It's led by mostly a big corporation when it comes to, I don't know, wind parks, etc. And the use of solar energy is very, very low and limited. It's not focused on citizens. So the fact that people are not including in planning, like they were not including in planning of Belgrade, that was the case with also not including community in terms of the project Jadar, and I will start with that first, because this is the project of the Rio Tinto company that has actually never done extraction of lithium. Very, very complex project, one of the most complex about the lithium extractions from the unique mineral Jadarit, which has only not just lithium but boron as well. It was portrayed to us that if we have this project, then we will become a champion of green transition. Green transition that's not even happening for the citizens of Serbia, but basically mostly as a, and hopefully not, but this will be a soon decision in the European institutions whether this will be a strategic EU project. So something that citizens of Serbia first see as a project to help a German automobile industry, and maybe then, in consequence, fight climate change. But this also can be debatable whether this is the way to fight climate change with electrical vehicles only, and not focusing on public transport. So that's one thing. It's not for us. Nobody can afford electrical vehicles in Serbia at the moment. But also, this is a densely populated area. Depending on agriculture, people fear that this will be pollution of the soil. It already has been polluted by the research done in the past 20 years. That also underground water will be polluted, that their way of life will be changed, and nobody asked them about that. And more importantly, I think what managed to get the solidarity of the entire country with the residents of the area is that we don't actually know what are the developmental goals of Serbia, whether there will be other mines, because there are allegedly more lithium deposits around Serbia as well. Maybe not like Jadar, but you know, so these are the fears. So citizens are not including in this planning, they are opposing it, they're very anxious and frightened about this. And maybe for the first time, you have actually people voting for the ruling party that are against the project that they're pushing. So I would say we here have a alleged conflict between environmental goals to protect our environment, our water, our land, our soil and air, and climate goals. But again, then I would say maybe it's debatable whether this is the way we fight climate change. And that's where I would maybe go to the railway project. Because on one hand, this is an important thing, I think, because we don't actually have, we have minuscule usage of railways now in Serbia because it's completely destroyed. Everything is focused on investment for years have been focusing on highways, so private cars, you know, big infrastructure projects are highways and not local roads, for instance. So to finally focus a little bit on rails, it's good. The only international train that we have is Belgrade to Bar, which was built in Yugoslavia in workers' actions, like the big Yugoslav infrastructure project. And also a trivia, the last train that left train station in the city of Belgrade because of the Belgrade waterfront project, left to Budapest. So hopefully this connection between Belgrade and Budapest with rail will connect us in a more easier, and that's a good thing. We hope that this will happen and that will put emphasis on public transportation as well. However, these, among other Chinese investments in mines and other type of factories like Linglong in Zrenjanin, are the ones that are pushing Serbia to be more dependent on China loans, and also lack transparency. Like with the Belgrade waterfront project, laws have been adopted to basically avoid procurement procedures, lack of transparency, you know, and all of this does not contribute not to democracy, but also not to a sustainable democracy, and has to my fear is this has huge detrimental consequences. It's very difficult to explain then to citizens that if you fight for green transition, it's to be just, and this is not it. And then basically it's almost difficult to even talk about these goals as owned by citizens. That's why, in a way, current struggles, I think, are framed that environmental activists are almost like against green transition, the way it was basically forced upon citizens. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we will talk a bit later about the challenges. Now I would like to ask a question from Borislav. As both an environmentalist and a policymaker, can you tell us what are the most important environmental issues Bulgaria is facing, and also given the fact that the government continuously changes in Bulgaria, how challenging is it to advance green issues in the parliament?
Thank you for the questions. Good morning, everyone, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. It's an honor for me to be here with you. And this traditional democracy forum of Budapest, thanks to the mayor and all the organizers, is a good point to discussion and to share opinion and also good practices. It's a super electoral year. This year, you know, we already talked about, for Bulgaria, is just another super electoral year, as we have two elections, parliamentary elections this year, as it was the same last year and the year before. So for the 3.5 years, we are going to have 7 parliamentary elections, which means every half a year we have elections. Of course, yeah, this is very challenging. It's bad for the institutions, because when you have a new parliament and new government, some of the procedures start again and again. Parliament itself, in order to construct the parliamentary commissions, etc., need time. So you almost done it, and then another elections are coming. The reason for that is basically, and of course, unfortunately, the consequences is the populism and the raising of the far right, which somehow is making impossible to construct a good majority without the far right and without populist parties. But at the same time, due to the fact that there are so many elections and parties, especially when elections are already settled, like the next are on 27th of October. So in the parliament, they're not talking about reforms, they're not talking about the needed legislation, but they're using as a platform for, you know, pre-electoral speeches and populism. And when you see the budget of the state, this is a reflection of the same, like a lot of populism. Fortunately, this not affects in a bad ways the economic situation of the state, and the social consequences are not too bad. Some of the stakeholders in the economics sector, like business owners, etc., they're even saying it is good for the economy, because when there is no stable government, there is nobody to push them and to try to corrupt and, you know, and etc. So, so there are some good consequences of this political crisis. We are having economic growth of average 3% per year, which is even higher than the average of the EU. We are having historically low unemployment rate of 4%. So from this perspective, we are in a political crisis, but this is not a crisis for the state. It's just for the political parties mainly, and for some of the institutions. I'm going directly to the question. Sorry for this introduction, but it's needed just to understand what is the situation in Bulgaria at this moment. So when it comes to the green successes, I was part of 2 parliaments and 1 government in that period of time of 3.5 years. As I also served as a deputy prime minister for climate policies for 7.5 months, which is as its own a success in a way of green transition for the state, because it's a recognition that these kind of policies are needed and they have to be prioritized. So it was for the first time when a minister of environment was also deputy prime minister, and not just signing silently the environmental impact assessments and talking about the beautiful nature. I had the power to really influence the situation in the state, to have a higher control, which result of even closure of the dirtiest 2 coal power plants, to announce 15 new protected areas, and many other things. But when it comes to the systematic changes, you can see it in the recovery and resilience plan, because that was the instrument how the European Union member states are kind of recovering from the COVID pandemic and all this stress. And it happened at the same time as the Russian invasion in Ukraine and all the problems with the energy system. So we have the greenest recovery and resilience plan that was mentioned by the European Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen. More than 55% of the plan was for the climate measures. At the same time, we have another projects and funds, in total more than 5 billion euros for these 5 years in order to achieve a good green transition, because green transition is existential, not just for ecological matters, but also economic, also security, also socially. And it's already happening. Nobody can argue that we could make a turn. No, it's already happening. 1/3 of the economic growth in the last year was a result of the investment in renewable energy sources. But at the same time, we need it, especially the cities, by the way, because they're not just the places in our region where most of the people are living, or the highest number of people of the countries are living, but also they're an example how the country is going to reform and change, and to be a good example for another cities in the region and within the country. So you know that Europe is warming twice faster than average for the world. This means that in the next years we are facing 3 grados Celsius than the pre-industrial area, and we cannot adapt it in that very fast. So we need some measures. Maybe I'll take the floor a little bit later, not to eat all the time now of the forum, but just as an example of what I said at the beginning. So we as a government at that time, in 2022, we made a statement, and also as a reform in the National Recovery and Resilience Plan, that we will decrease by 40% the CO2 emissions in 2026 than 2019. And the parliament, because of the populistic matters, 2 times tried to de-announce this. And the government after us also tried to not implement this. So never happened as a legislation, etc. And guess what? 35% decrease of the CO2 emissions already happening. Already happened. Just due to the market influence and due to the fact that renewables are more competitive than the other sources. And maybe this was the biggest success. We just made some steps in the energy democracy. Now some cities could organize an energy community, which means city investing, but also attracting investment of citizens in order to make an energy cooperative, in order to produce electricity by renewables for itself. So this is a very good example. And the other one is that the business could implement renewables not by requesting, but just by informing the institutions about this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As Budapest has a green mayor, it's important to reflect on the green transition of the city as well. So Kata, with the ongoing budget cuts significantly affecting the city, and we know that many sectors are facing financial pressure. So in this uncertain economic environment, how is the city managing to maintain its commitment to the green agenda?
Yes, thank you very much. You know, we have to. Okay, reality is always a little bit different, but for EU countries, we have this very strict framework. All of the states agreed on one thing, to be continent to become climate neutral by 2050. We have the Fit for 55 package, we have a climate law, we have a lot of goals on mitigation, so to reduce emissions, to have more locally produced green energy, to use less energy. We have strong commitments on adaptation and strong commitments on the European level for biodiversity. So everybody has to cope with that. Every state has to cope with that. Hungary has to do it. What is the role of Budapest in this? Our role in this, and in many other things in democracy, we are sort of reserves of democracy in Hungary, to show a different path of governing, even though our financial situation is not so bright. But we are thinking a lot. And we are politicians, our role as politicians is to put climate issues on the national agenda, to have people not just hear about it, but also to think about it. We think about it a lot. We have all the strategies. Everybody has the strategies on sustainable mobility, on biodiversity, on energy security, on cleaning the energy, on having better public services. We do that. But we also put a lot of emphasis on participation. I know everybody else is thinking a lot about participation. We're trying to include our citizens with more or less success. What I always say is, it's the same with the climate thinking, with the participatory thinking. We know that everything is changing. Democracy is changing. We don't know how. What we can have an influence on is the direction of how democracy is changing. We, in Budapest, we think that if democracy is changing, the direction should be that more people make the decision, not less. We don't know how will this happen. We're the same with the climate transition. We just signed in the past few days our climate city contract. Budapest is one of the climate neutral city mission cities. What is this climate contract? We put together a roadmap how to become climate neutral by 2030. Is it a mission impossible? It is a mission impossible. Why are we doing it? Because every decision we make on budget, on roads, anything, we have to see that this decision will put us in the direction we put on this roadmap. Will it converge or will it diverge? It helps us with every day because we know where we want to go. We don't know how fast we will get there. And I know that each and every our cities have a different path. I always say it's like climbing a mountain. We set the peak, we want to go there, but we have to cut our own path. And it's in the European context,
we have a great cooperation of cities. We know each other, mayors, we have the European Committee of the Regions, we share best practices, we have the Green Deal going local, we know who's doing what, and it will not be the same for everyone. But we cities cut many different paths. And I think that is the way to go on. This is why I really believe in local democracies, in strengthening local democracies, because it's not one way to go. There's a lot of innovation capacity, because there are a lot of gaps, financial gaps, innovation gaps in becoming climate neutral as a continent. But cities can fill in this gap, not financially maybe, but we do a lot of thinking. And the main source of my anxiety was, in the past 1 year, it was water. And I think much more on adaptation than mitigation. So we are in the phase now, we had 3 flood alerts in 1 year. Before that, it was like 10 years ago. All spring, I was afraid that we will not have enough water. We drink the water of the Danube River. If we were expecting a very hot summer, all the snow from the Alps disappeared. More than 100 million Europeans drink the water reserves from the Alps. And there was no snow in the Alps. We had no idea if there will be enough water in the Danube to drink it in the summer. And then a flood came in June, and now another one. And it's impossible to build capacities for all the extremities. So we're doing a lot of thinking and sharing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's very good to hear that you share a lot of good practices with each other. So, Erion, the green transition is a key aspect of the EU enlargement process, right? And I'm sure that Tirana is doing a lot of things. So, could you share what Tirana is doing to advance its green transition and align with the EU standards?
Thank you very much. I'm flattered that the green transition is the first session. It beats the session on the role of the church, the Russian aggression, and who is eating cats and dogs in the US election. So it certainly speaks volumes of the importance of the topic and the hierarchy of priorities. So I'm delighted. But I'm also delighted to be with the 2 wonderful friends, Mayor of Dubai and Mayor of Manhattan, the super mini cities that we run, and the grotesque, sometimes, context that we have to run our cities. But on a serious note, a major congratulations to Gergely for his epic re-election. I told him this is definitely Netflix material, so it's a matter of who's going to copyright it first and then start producing shortly. Hungarian politics are never short of drama. But congratulations. And actually, I wanted to take one moment to reflect on what Gergely said, because I found it fascinating. I'm not a mayor of a Green Party. I'm socialist. No one is perfect. It's okay. But, you know, all right. But, you know, we have 2 Green Party mayors and some socialist friends. But what I appreciated in what Gergely said in the opening remarks, which I think was the key to his phenomenal victory, difficult but phenomenal victory, is that sometimes we allow a lot of the issues to skip our agenda because someone else has copyrighted them or branded them or monopolized them. So, for example, he spoke on the issue of security, of running cities where people feel safe. And somehow we have come to a silent agreement that this is a conservative matter. You land in Budapest airport and it says, "Welcome to family-friendly Hungary." You know, me and my 2, co-workers who came here, the first thing we checked this morning, whether our kids went to school and whether they were safe and whether, our partners at home, had a good night. We're also family-friendly. And somehow we have let a lot of the issues skip the progressive agenda. So we're seen only as sort of, green, tree-loving people, which is true. We do love trees and we do love green and we do love to have fresh air and we don't like the toxins in the environment, but we also love our families. And, some of us also go to church. And we definitely want our cities to be safe. So I think that particular remark made me think that us progressive should not allow certain agendas to be completely hijacked and monopolized by the conservatives, which is I think, a terrible mistake we've done in the last decade by allowing populists to literally march over some of the topics that are very dear to the left and to the green and to the progressives. So that was my remark on that, and thank you, Gergely, and congratulations again. On the issue of the green transition, I was very happy to see, together with my wonderful friend Tomislav, that Tirana and Zagreb were ranked top 10 green cities, green capitals of Europe, according to the European Environmental Agency. So, you know, we run two small cities, almost the two little engines that could type of story. But apparently it is possible. It is possible to come, you know, we used to be the Pyongyang of Europe, the most isolated country in the world. We used to have one Malev flight a week with Marxist-Leninists already vetted in Budapest before they actually came to Tirana. And how such an isolated country and such a brutalist capital of that country could actually catch up and keep up, not only with the green agenda, but a lot of the modernization efforts, I think is an example that any country can do it, and any city can do it. And even, you know, when it really feels dark, usually the darkest hour of the night is right before dawn, it's right before the sun comes out. And I think a lot of the gimmicks and the changes that we've done in Tirana could be applied elsewhere. Now, some of it is inherited from our past. So Albania has 99.9 green energy production from the waterways. Now, this was not part of progressive politics. This was part of Enver Hoxha and psychopathic dictatorship, being isolated and working with China to do water dams. And because we only know how to do water dams, we never did thermal or nuclear or coal or fuel or gas. And even, you know, from the transition to the capitalist system, because that's the only way we know how to produce energy, we kept doing it, even with the private sector. Now, that oftentimes comes into collision with other green agendas. You know, Albania boasts the last remaining wild river in Europe, untamed river, Vjosa, not like the Danube, which is tamed and still it's acting aggressively. But, you know, the effort of our green movement and volunteers, even though a previous government had given a concession for green energy because it was, you know, water dam, we said, well, we can have both. You know, we can maybe cancel this deal, keep the last European wild river, and still be able to produce energy, maybe in other sources, I mean, maybe in other locations, and still not forfeit the future. You know, it's a matter of how you see these things. I think for Gergely, Tomislav, and I, we don't see our cities as an inheritance from our predecessors. We see our cities on loan from our successors. You know, we've loaned these cities, these places, these locations, these countries, these territories from our children. And they are on loan to us as managers, so we should leave them in a much better position than we did before. I was inspired by Carlos Moreno, who happens to be here, and a great mentor to all of us. And we said, well, look, you know, if he could inspire the city of Paris, he could definitely inspire Budapest and Zagreb and Tirana. So when we started with our car-free downtown, you know, at least for us who are in politics, you run for office and you say, who wants change? And everybody raises their hand because change is a very sexy thing, right? But then when you ask the same people after election, you say, so guys, who wants to change? And everybody puts their head down, you know, I have him change first because I'm a bit more... So we all love change, but when it happens to other people, we don't love to change. So 90% of the people at the time were totally against the car-free downtown. We have a communist mayor, he's taking cars away. Again, like Enver Hoxha, you know, we were denied private property for 50 years, and now he wants to take them away. But long story short, it was not the usual way of the think tanks and the focus groups and the great advertisement. He was actually using some unusual characters. And in our case, it was children who convinced their parents that this was the right thing to do. Because we are so obsessed about focus groups and polls, which means we are obsessed about what voters and taxpayers think. But are voters and taxpayers the only shareholders in the city? And since our cities are on loan from our children, well, maybe they are also shareholders that should have a say. So when we were organizing our first car-free days for kids to participate, and parents were giving us the middle finger, both metaphorically and physically, It was the kids in the dinner conversation who said, but you know, Mom, do you remember that bike you bought me like 5 years ago that I could never use? I used it for the first time in the car for a day. And Auntie, you know, do you remember the rollerblades you bought me for my last birthday? This was the first time I could use them. So eventually, all of us, we realized this, even in this panel. We're all suspicious of politicians, right? But no one is suspicious of their own child. No one. You don't suspect your kid. Oh, okay, eventually you do, but at an early age you don't. So if it's the mayor saying, but you know, he's like a greenwasher, so he's going to, of course he wants cars away. But you know, if it's your child saying that, look, I had a great experience. I was able to socialize. I was getting my motor skills right. Now, of course, they don't speak this language, but they're sharing the same ideas. So the idea is, based on the 15-minute city and what Carlos has put as a blueprint for mayors, all of our ambition is, how do we leave this city a lot better than what we found it? Now, there's this big obsession about smart cities, right? So there's like a big race on who puts more gadgets on the pole. And, you know, we go to all these events and everybody's trying to sell the mayor something. So there was this guy who said, you know, worked for a big German firm, and he had sort of this big panel. It looked like street furniture, like these advertisement panels. But, you know, he had like green fungus, and, you know, he said you can put it on a charger, and it will suck up all the carbon from the air. And through these filters, these organic filters, it will filter it and it will produce oxygen. Sounds great, right? And but he said, you know, there's a cost, of course. And I said, you know, how much for this street furniture? He said, you know, for you, because you're a good mayor, 250,000 euros. I said, 250,000 euros, and you know, this is made in Germany, correct? Because I said, you know, we have something in Albania that does the same thing. It sucks up carbon, produces oxygen, and we call it the tree. And it's for 5 euros, you know? Because sometimes we obsess to reinvent the wheel, and nature has given us solutions that are even the dumbest mayor in the world can plant a tree. You don't have to go to Harvard or come to the Budapest Forum to learn how to do it, right? So in that sense, we try to reinvent hot water all the time, but nature has given us the solutions. And when it comes to sort of flood mitigation and getting all these areas that were eroded, you know, I have terrible memories from my teenage years, because it was right after the collapse of communism, and everything that was public was communist. They belonged to the state, including forest, you know, communist trees. So these communist trees were executed because they belonged to the previous regime. So we definitely have to cut them. You know, we cannot coexist with communist trees. So this hysteria to take on nature and politicize, and so it's been now 30 years that we're trying to make peace with nature. And sometimes, again, it's one thing to have the city plant trees, but it's a completely different thing to tell kids, look, all the kids in Tirana will plant a tree for their birthday. You don't want to be the only kid in the class who hasn't planted a tree for their birthday. But it goes from the city contracting to crowdsourcing from people. And a kid who plants a tree will never cut a tree again for the rest of their life. And they will also grow with that tree. They will go during the summer and water it. They will go after a storm and see if the branches need to be trimmed. And it has completely changed. And sometimes, and I emphasize this issue of children, but when it comes to the bike lanes, to the car-free streets, to the big plazas, to building new parks, to planting trees, sometimes changing the frequency and not only talking to the same people who've already decided who they want to vote, but move from this obsession about the next election to the obsession about the next generation may make a difference also in this green transition. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to inform the audience that we will open the floor later if we have some time. So just start thinking about any questions that you might have for the panelists. So now I would like to give you the opportunity to reflect on each other and also maybe share some ideas. What are your priorities regarding the green transition for the next 5 years?
It was very inspirational from all of you, but I just had to not to give a counter example, but with something you said about if you plant a tree, then you'll never cut a tree or something like that. we as activists, before we became politicians, also did a lot of actions like that, and citizens loved them, of course. But oftentimes the tree would die, you know, nobody would take care about that. And also, unfortunately, because this was successful, we had extreme right-wing, even neo-fascist groups trying to emulate the same thing. So at some point everybody was planting trees, but we had less and less trees because overall policies of the mayors, including the current one, is more concrete and less trees. So that's certainly one of the, I mean, you have to win power, of course, for that, but you can still raise this issue, and I think citizens all know this, but still this keeps going, they keep winning elections or stealing elections, that the green infrastructure is less and less in Belgrade and elsewhere, and this is a huge problem. Of course, this summer that we saw, it was very warm and people were complaining about that. That's certainly one of the major goals. And the second, I want to be shorter to give time to all the panelists, is just to follow up on where I ended in the first round, to democratize and focus energy transition on citizens, to make them more, you know, energy citizens, more active, and not just recipients of the basically plans that are corporate-driven, profit-driven, and just legitimized as green transition. And that's certainly, you know, the case in Serbia. We have only about 3,000 prosumers right now. Citizens are more interested than this actually legislation allows them, and gets complicated for them to do this and to be participants of this. And we are oftentimes afraid that even projects that are now done, very expensive, not transparent, but still required, like with communal infrastructure, with wastewater treatment, that this will be privatized after, built with loans taken from Chinese or elsewhere. So in a way, involvement of citizens in this process gives them ownership, and then they will fight for this. And of course, coming from a country that is no longer democracy, that democracy is priority goal, even for having a more ambitious climate goals. So I'll stop here because I see that we don't have enough time.
Also would like to just reflect to some of the things that were just mentioned in the previous session. Very inspirational, by the way. I know that being, not personally, never been in the local authorities, but mayors, they're facing at the same time the legislation and all these priorities from the top to the, and then talking with the people and facing directly such kind of implementation challenges and all those. Just I'd like to say something, because also the panel is green transition of the capitals in the Southeast Europe. Just to underline something very important, as we always talk about the needed transition and the goals, but just we have to know that there are some big, very major producers of pollution that could be easily removed and just replaced by something else. And this is mainly in the energy sector. And capitals are using a lot of energy, like for the institutions themselves, and all the public, you know, authorities and companies, etc. And still, the energy sector is the biggest producer of GDP. And the facts are very, very like clear. The first steps for the green energy transition are on a good price. Like. We are decreasing the CO2 emissions by the energy sector, and at the same time increasing the GDP, just because they are not economically feasible. Nowadays, it is the best competitive when it comes to price and efficiency is the renewables. What is needed is to balance the grid. So it means that you need batteries, which could be also natural. By the way, in Albania, you could use some of the dams as a nature batteries. And just to add more solar in this. Just giving you numbers, like my own country, Bulgaria, we have reduced the CO2 emissions by 1990, when the changes, the democratic changes started, 3 times. So no, we increased the GDP 3 times, but we decreased the CO2 emissions twice. So it means that it is possible. Like on the year of accession in the EU, we've been increasing the GDP by 50%, and since then we increased 100% the GDP. And the emissions almost the same, so it is possible. And a lesson that could be, and this is something that I recommend to the mayors here, very recently in August, there was this session of the IPCC. IPCC is International Panel for Climate Change. It is an institution that was created in 1988 by the World Meteorological Organization and United Nations Environmental Program. So it's not directly related to the Climate Change Convention, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, but it is the advisory board. So there was a session in Sofia in August as a compensation of the blockage, because this year COP29, it had to be in Sofia. And it was my initiative of candidacy, but then Russia blocked. And in these negotiations, you need a consensus of the group of the states, in this case, the Eastern European states. So Russia blocked us for this, but as a compensation, we had this session. So in this session, 61st session of IPCC in Sofia, there was a decision of outline of the special report on climate change and cities. So it will be ready in 2027. So unfortunately, this is just the outline. But when you look the decision and when you look the structure of this special report, you're getting a lot of thoughts about what it is needed to be done and where is the focus and the priorities in this. And also something very recently, yesterday, it was announced the structure of the European Commission and the candidates for the European commissioners. So look on the structure, look on the portfolios of the vice presidents. So we are talking about clean, just, and competitive transition. Look on the sectors, and you will see that this is already happening. We need to adapt. For the cities, this is crucially important, because all the heat waves are, the cities, the capitals are facing even harder, the heat waves, due to the fact that there are so many heat spots or heat islands in the cities. This is something we should reflect. All the capitals, I think all the capitals has rivers, so floods are something that should be faced, and there are so many nature-based solutions for the climate adaptation. And this is also very important, just to look first on the nature-based solutions, like the trees, not the technologies. It's not that we don't need technologies, we need it, but when you have a nature-based solutions, it's better to use it. It's cheaper, it's more efficient, and it was proved by the centuries and thousands of years and millions of years before. So this is my thoughts about what it was said. Just do not forget that air quality, water quality is something that is basic. And there is a direct link of water shortages due to the climate change, air quality due to the climate change, and climate change due to the air quality. So it's both directions. So we need to work in synergy, at the same time mitigating the climate change, but also adapting. Very importantly, to adapt. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so I heard that we are running out of time, so I must stop the panel. Or do we have time to? One question. Yeah, so I'm sorry. I will give you, so we have time for only one question. So is there anyone who, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I simply wish to remind you that from the late 1980s, all these countries, not simply in Southeastern Europe, in Eastern Europe and in Central Eastern Europe, were called transition countries. That transition was not identified that time with this labeling that green transition. That time it was transition to market economy, forgetting about the green dimension of this change. So I simply wanted to remind you, because my belief that we are all, including Albania, Hungary, Poland, Slovakia, and so on, we are still almost in the same transition, but that transition could mean for very many of us a transition to better democratization in a much broader sense, if we can interpret the green approach. It's also the social solidarity and better life, not only in the cities or in the capitals, but generally in our countries. So actually my question, how you see this last about 3 decades? What happened to us? We slowed down, we lost our dreams, or we can simply also waiting for a new generation to go back to the realization of those dreams from the late 1980s, early 1990s, which cannot be obviously done only by the efforts of the green mayors and the green movements. So this is my, to some extent, poetical question. Thank you.
Okay.
Just a very short reflection, please.
Sure. Yes, of course. Easy poetical question with poetical answer. So it was not only the transition to a free market economy, it was also transition to liberal democracy. And in my mind, a green transition is what we are doing, and green transition is what cities are doing. I think cities are the champions of green transition, and they are much more quicker in this than the national governments. That's why we always advocate for EU funds being accessible to the cities directly without the national governments as intermediaries, because we see what's happening, for example, in Hungary, but also in other countries. And in that aspect, I think what is crucial, and I want to follow up a little bit on what Kata said, is, and also what Erion said, is how we frame this green transition. This is crucial, because transportation, when it comes to climate mitigation, is very conflicting policy. And you know, in Zagreb, when we changed one lane from 3-lane street to cycling lane, it became on TV news every day. Every day in main news, it was like counting the traffic jam on this street. It became a reality TV for weeks. That was 2 years ago. Last year, we increased the pedestrian zone. Again, the same thing. For 2 weeks in the main news, every single day. Reporting from the pedestrian zone, is it colorful or not? Is the drawing good or not? Etc., etc. But it's a very conflicting issue. But if we frame it, I think, more as an air quality, if we frame it more as a health issue, urban health issue, then, you know, I think we can, you know, we can cast the wider net. The same thing with the adaptation. I was running yesterday night in next to the Danube River. It was a surreal experience. I've been many times in Budapest. I could run on the level of the water, next to the level of the water of this mighty Danube River. So I mean, the climate adaptation is all about safety. Therefore, you know, putting the narrative of safety and pushing for climate adaptation, adapting our cities to the climate change effects, and putting the narrative of health when we talk about the climate mitigation, I think it's also crucial. And also, just to take the opportunity also to congratulate Gergely for this victory. I mean, we met many times after the elections, and also I think together in Vienna, in Bratislava we met. Every time when I asked him, he would tell me the different result after the elections, and the different number of votes every week it would change, and it was definitely, I think the House of Cards, they stopped with another season in the US because the political reality became more crazier than the TV show, than the fiction. So I think, definitely we would need, I think I would watch House of Cards of the Budapest elections because it was really an epic drama, and, congratulate you for this, for winning, because as you can see, without cities cooperating on these agendas, we are much weaker. So that's why we need allies, and that's why I thank to the citizens of Budapest for electing you and your team for the next mandate.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank my panelists. Yeah.
It was unintentional drop mic.
So yeah, thank you very much. I'm sorry that we didn't have more time, but thank you very much for also attending this panel.